Going to talk about the Torah portion, Pikudei, and we of course must address the situation in the Ukraine on the Jewish perspective
Yeah.
because it is so scary, it is so frightening to read the reports of what's happening there. And of course, from our perspective, we always look at the Jewish viewpoint of but the human viewpoint as well, what's happening to the general population. Who would believe such a war for I think for no reason other than ego. But anyway, let's start with the Torah portion, and then we'll be able to have a discussion. I hope you'll share your insights on what you feel is happening there. Maybe you have the answers, Diane and Jane. So this week's Torah portion is really about accountability. If you wonder, where was the first audit, AUDIT, documented in the Torah, the first financial audit, the first financial CPA audit, look into this week's Torah portion, where it opens up the words, Eile Pikudei HaMishkan. These are the accountings of the Mishkan, which were counted at the word of Moshe. In other words, Moshe says to the Jewish people, after we build the tabernacle, the Mishkan, I'm going to give you my financial report, my income and expense sheet, what I spent on each item, silver, copper, gold, and so on and so forth. Give an accounting. And the Medrash explains why suddenly does Moshe tell the Jewish people he has to give them an accounting. Because though it's not mentioned in the actual text, it's alluded to, like we always know, that most of the story is between the lines, is that the nation, people were murmuring. Look, the rabbi has a new BMW. His wife just redid her kitchen. And did you notice her new purse from Chloe? Where did he get the money? We didn't give him a raise. He was rebuilding the tabernacle. He must have taken a little, how do you call it when you take a little kickback from the construction company? They must have given him a kickback. So there were murmurings among the people that maybe Moshe might have snipped off a little bit from the top, which is human nature. Human nature is like that. Somebody suddenly does something extravagant or has something beautiful. Human nature is like, where did she get the money? Did her husband get a raise? Did she get a raise? Did she inherit? People love to chat about it, and people notice it. So remember last time I told the story of the collector. He was sent by the great Rebbe of Chaim Brisk to collect money. And the wealthy donor saw him come out of a nice coach, a nice taxi, dressed beautifully. So he didn't want to give money. He says, so Rabbi Chaim asked him, why didn't you give your usual donation? He says, why? Because did you see the way the collector, the fundraiser looked? He was dressed to kill. He came out of a beautiful coach. I'm not giving my money for his lodgings in a 5-star hotel so he could collect money. And Reb Chaim put him in his place. And he said, it's not about who's collecting the money. It's the intentions of the donor, which is how it's evaluated. Not about who comes to you for money. You're looking at it all wrong. And of course, he gave a check. He gave the money, but the Rebbe showed him also that every one of his nickels and dimes went directly for the yeshiva students for the support of the institution. He shouldn't judge the one who's the collector, the fundraiser. So going back, there's murmurings. So Moshe says to the Jewish people, I'm going to give you my Excel spreadsheet, my QuickBooks. I'm going to show you where every nickel and dime went, to the last cent, to the last coin. There was a husband and wife driving, and a police pulls them over. And he comes over to the car and he said, "Sir, did you realize you were going 80 miles an hour?" And Harry says, "Officer, I don't think so. I think I was going much slower." So his wife pipes up, "Harry, tell the truth. You were speeding." So he gives his wife a dirty look. So then the policeman says, "And by the way, I'm also going to give you a ticket because you're not wearing your seatbelt." So Harry says, "Officer, when you pulled me over, I opened my seatbelt because I thought I was going to have to step out of the car." Harry's wife says, "Harry, you never wear your seatbelt. Admit it." He gives his wife like an angry look. And then the officer walks to the back. He says, "Oh, by the way, sir, your brake light is out." Harry said, "Well, it must have just happened when I pulled over. My brake light was never broken." His wife says, "Harry, I've been telling you for 6 months to fix the brake light." He looks at his wife. Margaret, how are you? What are you doing? How could you tell the police officer this? What's on your mind here?" The police officer looks at the wife and he says, "Madam, does your husband always talk to you in such a disrespectful manner?" So he says, "No." She says, "No, only when he's drunk."
That was very
Accountability. So in the next few minutes, we're going to discuss the accountability, how even a leader, even a president, a prime minister, has to be accountable to his people. Transparency is extremely important in Jewish life. Transparency and honesty. And I always say, somebody went to ask me something, I said, it's always good to address the person directly. Don't mumble to your friends. "Do you think maybe they took?" Blah, blah. Go to the person and say, "I'm just curious. How did you spend the money? What did you do with my donation? How suddenly this, that, and the other?" If you're really bothered by somebody's accountability, ask them to their face. "Moshe, tell me really, what did you do with all the gold and the silver?" Especially since Moshe announces we have enough. Remember his announcement? Stop bringing donations. The Mishkan has enough money, enough gold, enough silver, enough copper, enough flax, linen, and wool, and so on. Always go directly to the person and say, "Listen, I suspect, or I want to see your books." Always take the direct approach. So before we go into the actual accounting, which is going to be something which I think is unbelievable, if you look at the story of Moshe, it doesn't say in the text anywhere that the Jewish people came to him for an accounting. It doesn't say anywhere that there were murmurings or gossip behind his back. It's obviously, we learn from, good morning, Margaret, we learn from the commentaries, from the Medrash, what we call the oral tradition, the hidden parts of Torah. And the rabbis are the ones that write. And based on this, why does suddenly Moshe give an accounting? Good morning. Because the Medrash says there were murmurings among the people that maybe money was misallocated. After all, Moshe is driving a brand new chariot, let's say, or his wife has a brand new Louboutin shoes. Where did she get it? So, by Moshe saying to the Jewish people, "I'm going to give you an accounting," we surmise, based on the commentaries, that there was murmurings about this. So the question is, why doesn't the Torah openly tell the story? Right away say, there were murmurings and Moshe said give an accounting. And the plot thickens, because if you look throughout the beginning of time, there's a lot of what we call cover-ups. And I want to share some of those cover-ups with you. Okay? Let's go back in time. We said the first one. They said to him, "What happened to all the money? Where did it come from? Where did you spend it?" Okay. Now we go back in time when Moshe had to build the tabernacle, and there were many confusing moments where Moshe didn't know what God meant, like with the menorah. Moshe didn't understand how do you build the menorah for the tabernacle. It had to be one piece of solid gold. It couldn't be two pieces. So what did God do? God said, you know what, Moshe, I'll do it myself. I'll make it myself. Forget it. Then the sanctuary was completed earlier than it's expected. So it sat idle for 3 months. Another hidden cover up about what went on behind the scenes. Because when you read the passages, it seems like all smooth sailing. They made a beautiful tabernacle. Everything was perfect. Okay? Now we're seeing that there was some stuff going on behind the scenes. Then another problem occurred that's not indicated in the text. When it came time to actually put up the walls were so heavy, the commentaries describe no one could lift up the walls. And they didn't have a crane in the desert. What ended up happening, Moses went and God made a miracle, and Moses was able to push up the walls of the tabernacle. Another mishap happens here in the story that we're not aware of in the text. Now we're going to go back to creation. You have to hear a little bit about creation, how these things happen that we don't even know about. In the beginning, the first day, God created a light, right? It says, Vahi or. But God realized that the light that God put into the world had to be hidden because it would be so overpowering, people couldn't exist. You can't land on the sun and sit there. The light is too overpowering. So God had to hit the light. Was this a mistake? Then you have on the second day, God separated the heaven and the earth. The waters of the heaven went up into the sky. The waters of earth stayed below, right? The oceans, the rivers. But the lower waters complained. God, why should we be down here and those waters get to go up? It's not fair. So there was a lot of complaining going on. That's the next day. Then you have the fourth day of creation. God creates a moon, a sun, equal in size. So the moon says to God, excuse me, God, there can't be two kings in the solar system. You can't make me the same size as the sun. There can only be one ruler of the solar system, of the celestial world. So God said, oh, you don't feel you could share the heavens with the sun? I'm going to make you smaller. So now the moon waxes and wanes. So there's another mistake God made. Okay, I'm going to do two more mistakes and then we'll go into it. Then, the day God created fish in the ocean, God created a fish called Leviathan, a husband and a wife, so they could procreate. But the Leviathan was such a giant fish that were they to have children, there would be no room in the world for people or anything else. So God took away the second Leviathan. So now there's only one left in the world, hidden. And when Mashiach comes, we're going to have the feast of this special fish. Another mistake. And then the final mistake in creation, right? The final mistake is he's about to create man and woman, the men and the women, Adam and Chava, and the angels say, God, what do you need men, women? They're going to give you tsaros. They're going to complain. They're going to deny your existence. They're not going to listen to you. Keep us, the angels. We don't need people. So God creates Adam and Chava. He doesn't listen to the angels. And what happens in the first 6 hours of creation? They eat from the tree of knowledge and they go against the word of God. And what does God say at the end of creation? Vayhi erev, vayhi boiker, yom shishi. And God saw that all he made, and it was very good. So what does God say was very good? Look at all the problems that came up. So Kabbalah asks the question, based on this week's Torah portion. First of all, why doesn't it just say the story? Spell it out. Why do we have to go read the rabbis and the commentaries and the secrets of the Torah to know what really happened? Was it a cover-up? Maybe God didn't want us to know that there's problems that arise at these times. Why do we have to deduce the whole story based on the rabbis, the commentaries, the medrash, the secrets, the Kabbalah, and so on? What do you think? And if God didn't put it in the text, did the rabbis betray God by revealing the true story? Did they reveal the secrets? And God is saying, who asked you to tell the secrets? Did I ask you to reveal my secrets? But obviously God wanted them reveal these secrets,
Well,
because otherwise they wouldn't be revealed.
How do they find? How do they find the secrets? I mean, how do they?
Oh,
where do they look? Yeah.
How do you find it? Because, as we discussed many times, how does Rashi know that the women were first? Right? Remember, how does Rashi know that God taught the Torah first to the women? That Moses, because it says, why does God repeat himself? Tell the house of Jacob, tell the house of Israel. Isn't the house of Israel the house of Jacob? So throughout the Torah text, which is the 5 books of Moshe, which are very concise,
right,
based on the words, the usage of words, the way they're repeated, why they're repeated, how they're repeated. There's so many ways that they deduce the true story. There's so many ways that they deduce the true story. Like, how do we know that there was an accounting? How do we know that there's, because why does Moshe suddenly say to the Jewish people, hi, everybody, I'm going to give you an accounting? So the rabbis analyzed that there was a backstory, that the Jewish people complained, said, where did all the money go, Moshe? You know, we did notice you're wearing a new cloak made out of very expensive fur. Where did you get the money? So the murmurings, go ahead, Jane, sorry.
Well, no. What you're saying is that in the history of the Earth's creation, there was always a bit of complaining and possible accountability and freedom of choice to make the right decision.
Very good. That's brilliant. I didn't think of it that way. Yes. So let's just ascertain that God wanted the rabbis, the sages, the prophets to tell us the real story. It's meant for us to know what really happened. But why isn't it explicitly written into the 5 books of the Torah? Well, practically speaking, like we said before, why did we need an oral tradition? Why didn't God keep it simple? Give us everything. Yeah, we would have a million books, but we would have it all directly from God written. Remember, it was written down later. And the answer is that God wanted the human endeavor. God wanted us to study the 5 books of the Torah with the oral tradition and draw out the conclusions and write the Talmud and write the Mishnah and write the Code of Jewish Law and write the books of Kabbalah. God wanted the human endeavor involved in Torah, in authentic Torah. But bringing it down is that God, I think, here is telling us something very interesting. Tell me if you agree. Based on the teachings of Lubavitcher Rebbe and Chassidus, that God doesn't want us to define the tapestry of our lives by our pitfalls, by the things that happen in our lives that don't always go correct, don't always go right, the poor decisions we make, the injustices that happen to us. God wants us to define our lives by the positive, by the good end results. So by documenting the story and not telling us every mishap directly in the book, in the storyline, it shows us, don't define yourself by your missteps. You know, you say to somebody, wow, I can't believe how much you accomplished in your life. And they go, oh, you should have seen me. How many times I fell. I almost killed myself 10 times. God doesn't want you to define yourself by the negative. We all know that our lives, how great we are, or how positive we are, or how much good we do for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, will have pitfalls and challenges and battles and mishaps and mistakes. You know, think of all the mistakes I made in my life. Wow, I'm ready to shoot myself. But don't define yourself by your mistakes, because constantly defining yourself by your mishaps will hold you back. So the Torah is telling us two things. Don't define yourself by your fallacies. And two, life is full of fallacies. Life is not perfect. Even God created a world and there were right away problems. The sun and the moon, the heavenly waters and the lower waters. The Leviathan, man and Adam and Chava right away at the beginning of time. With the building of the Mishkan. Do you know that when King Solomon was supposed to dedicate the temple, he overslept? And his mother Bathsheba had to wake him up? He overslept. The day the temple's supposed to be dedicated, he oversleeps. His mother says, Shlomi, get up. I was waiting for you. Where are you? How come you're not there? You're the king. You're the builder of the temple. Why aren't you there by the dedication? The champagne is waiting for you. He overslept. Also not documented in the text. It's a sub-story. Why did he oversleep? Because the night before he married Pharaoh's daughter. So, he was busy. But still, you're not there for the grand opening. So there's many stories in the Torah that we don't read about in the commentaries in the Medrash. Where are you? So we have to conclude that it's not a cover-up of biblical proportions, as we would say. It's not the Watergate scandal, but it's teaching us nothing is perfect in life. Even with the holiest of the holies, there were mishaps, there were problems, there were conflicts, but don't define your life by those conflicts, by those mishaps, by those battles. Define your life by everything that goes well and good in your life, because it could hold you back, which doesn't mean here don't acknowledge your mistakes. That's also a mistake. What it means is don't define yourself by the negative. Define yourself by the positive. So now let's go back to the accounting, the audit. Famous audit, the first audit documented in the Torah. And like we said, the Jewish people complained. They were complaining. And Moshe right away nipped it in the bud. He said, as soon as we finish building the tabernacle, I'm going to give you an accounting. And it is spectacular. We're going to unfold this accounting. So what happens is this. Ready? He tells them, he takes out his Excel spreadsheet, hi Diana, and he starts telling them how he spent the money. Ready? I'm going to read it in English. All the gold that had been used for the work and all the work of the holy was 29 talents, 730 shekels, according to the holy shekel. Okay, he starts telling them this was for this, and this was for that, and this was for that. Now, something very fascinating happens. Remember, we discussed last week how every Jewish person had to give a half a shekel for the building of the tabernacle? Why a half? Because no one is a whole. Together, we're one. Everyone is a half, and it teaches us no matter how rich or how poor you were, you still gave a half a shekel. And because, again, the two halves make the whole, which is the concept of Jewish unity. So now, Moshe tells the Jewish people, so there were 600,000 people who gave a half a shekel, right? That means there's 300,000 shekel. Everybody writing down the math? 600,000 halves equal 300,000 wholes.
Right.
He was able to take to the bank, so to speak. Okay? So he says, and that was used for casting the sockets of the holy Mishkan. What does it mean, casting the sockets? So they have giant poles, right? How does it hold the walls of the tabernacle? Sockets. He had to make these sockets made out of silver. Were they made out of silver or gold? I'll tell you right now. I'll tell you in a second. Okay, whatever. These sockets were made, and then the sockets went the beams, and that held the walls, right? So there's the sockets were very pivotal to keeping the Mishkan standing. So he says to the people, where did the 600,000 half shekel that you gave me go for? The sockets. Okay? But now 3,550 half a shekels are not accounted for. On the spreadsheet, Moshe can't remember what happened to the 3,550. He collected 600, 3,550 half shekels. So 600 half shekels were used for the sockets. But now he forgets what he used the rest of the half shekels for. He didn't use all the half shekels for the sockets. He forgets. So the Medrash tells us that God reminded him by God showing him a vision of the hooks that held the walls. The walls were hung up by hooks, and the rest of these half shekels were used to make these hooks that held the walls. Like think of a curtain hook. So Moshe now knew, oh, yeah, you're right, God. And he tells the people, I forgot, but now I remember 3,550 half shekels went for the hooks. And he finishes giving his accounting. Okay? So now the people are happy. We know where our money went. We know you didn't buy yourself a new BMW with the money. We know your wife didn't redo the patio with the money. We're happy. He gave an accounting. Beautiful. Right? Transparency. So now it's very strange, the story here. Right? Let me tell you why it's strange. Moshe remembers every single detail. He gave over the whole Torah. He passed judgment. He knew the laws. I mean, he had a photographic memory. He couldn't remember what happened to the 3,550 shekel that were not used for the sockets. He couldn't remember they were used for the hooks. Does that sound like Moshe? So you'll say he had a senior moment. Possibly. He had a senior moment. We all have moments, things fall out of our head. Okay, we could accept that. Should we just forget about it and move on? We'll say Moshe had a senior moment. What do you think? Anybody have any insight?
Well, not wanting him to be perfect.
Okay. But Moshe never establishes his perfection, as we see so many times.
Yeah.
He judges himself more harshly than we do. You know, there's another cute measure. When Moshe would wake up very early in the morning, people would say, he had a fight with his wife. When he would sleep in, they go, he's with his wife. You know, there was always gossip about Moshe. He couldn't get away from it.
Maybe he wanted the people to question him. Maybe he conveniently forgot, so they would have to think. I don't know.
Yeah, possibly. No, sometimes you make believe you don't know so that people will ask you, or you want to generate conversation from other people. You know, like you'll say to your child, why do you think, and you generate conversation. So that might be a nice answer. Does anybody else want to add anything?
Or trust.
What's the trust level? Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Trust level.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very good, because we just said that even leaders have to be accountable. There has to be transparency. No one is above transparency. You know what they say about a liar? What's the liar's worst punishment? Not that he's a liar, but that he can't believe anybody else. The worst thing is because we always judge people how we are. The liar's biggest punishment is he thinks everyone else is always lying because he's always lying.
Interesting.
So transparency is very important in Jewish life. It's right here, it says so. Sorry, sorry, give me 1 second. I have to shut something off. So anybody else want to offer another idea here? So based on Hasidus and Kabbalah, obviously, Jewish mysticism, there's a magnificent insight I want to share with you. That the Jewish people gave a half a shekel. 600,000 Jews gave a half a shekel. Okay? 3,550 Jews also gave a half a shekel. Those half a shekels he forgets. He forgot where the money went. The first 600,000, he remembered that it went for the sockets, which are the main frame of the tabernacle. The hooks are external to the tabernacle, right? Because the hooks are the curtains, but what's more important? The beams, the sockets. Okay? So there's a significance to the numbers here. The answer lies in the numbers. What's 600,000? What does it say? 600,000 Jews stood at Sinai. But these are not just 600,000 people, men, women, children. They are the generic souls of all generations forever. The 600,000 mentioned in the Torah that stood at Sinai and gave the half a shekel doesn't mean 600,000 only. It is the generic souls of all Jewish people forever. So every Jewish person comes from one of these 600,000 people. That's why it says that we all stood at Sinai. You said, well, I wasn't there. Diane, were you there? Do you remember? Did you have a dream about Sinai? But it means your soul was there because your soul was part of one of these 600,000 people. So when it came to the mainstream Jewish nation that stood under the flag of the teachings of Torah and God and mitzvahs, Moshe remembered them. Moshe saw them. But then there was a group of Jews that were on the outskirts. They were alienated. They didn't have the unity with the rest of the Jewish people. So Moshe kind of not forgot about them, but he thought to himself, they're not equally important to the 600,000. So God reminds him. He says, I don't know what happened to the 30,550 half shekels. I can't fathom what their relationship is with you, God. They're not part of the mainstream 600,000. What am I doing with these people?
Who are they?
The other Jews who didn't, what you would call, they didn't walk the walk, talk the talk. They didn't have the same connection to Torah and mitzvahs like the other 600,000. The Jews that might have felt alienated a little bit on the outskirts. Even during the giving of the Torah, there were those Jews that didn't feel part and parcel. They questioned. They were distant. So you see it in every generation. There are Jews that are distant from godliness, Torah, and mitzvahs. So God reminded Moshe something very, very important. You forgot? You forgot where the money was spent? They're the hooks of the tabernacle. They're the Jews. They may not be in the sockets. They may not be the beams. They may not be the ones that walk the walk and talk the talk. But they are part of the tabernacle. Maybe they're on the outside, but don't forget about them. Because Moshe couldn't fathom, what do I do with these 3,550? What did I do with those shekels? Did he really forget? Or did he really forget or not know, what do I do with the Jewish people who are not part of the mainstream Jews? We're used to, thank God, we grew up, my community, I grew up accepting all Jews and all humanity, everybody. But there's some people, you walk into their community, my friend told me she went shopping in Williamsburg and they looked at her like, and she's wearing jeans and a t-shirt, but she's Jewish, but she buys kosher. They were like saying in Yiddish, was did sie do? What is she doing here in our community? I didn't know what to do with her. And she just said, well, I'm just here to buy kosher groceries. And they couldn't understand what a woman with jeans and a t-shirt was doing in their Williamsburg supermarket when everyone who shops there is from that community, the Hasidic community. They couldn't fathom it. So Moshe didn't understand. What do I do with these 3,550 Jews, so to speak, metaphorically speaking? There were more. And God said, use this money for the hooks. They may not be the beams, but they're the hooks. In other words, they are still part of the Jewish people, even though you don't see them as part of the 600,000. And I want to explain it in a little more depth so that we understand the beauty of it. The word Yisrael means what? Jews. Yisrael, B'nai Yisrael, the people of Israel. Yisrael means Jews. If you take the first letter of each of those of the letters of the word Yisrael, you have Yesh, Shishu, Riboy, Isius, Batoira. The word Yisrael is an acrostic for there are 600,000 letters in the Torah. So not only are the 600,000 generic souls stood at Sinai, there are 600,000 letters in the Torah, and each one of us is a letter in the Torah. So that's why when you read a Torah scroll, not a book like this, a Torah scroll, the one that's handwritten, and the rabbi is reading it or the cantor is reading it and one letter is slightly rubbed or not clear, the ink is, you can't use the Torah. Why? It's called puzzle. It's nullified till you fix it, because the world cannot exist without every single Jew being present. Those 600,000 souls must always eternally be present in this universe. The Torah has 1/4 of a letter rubbed out. Your letter is rubbed out. They can't read the Torah. The world cannot exist without you. If you think you don't matter because you're 1 in a million, 1 in 600,000, you better change your mind, because the world cannot exist without you. You must be there. Now, what about the Jews that are the 3,550? So Moses went up to the heavens after he gave the Jews the second tablets, and he sees God writing on the Torah scroll. And what does he see? The Medrash describes, he sees God adding these crowns to the top of the letter. Now, if you ever looked at a Torah scroll, you'll see some letters have, did you ever see it? Little extra, like it looks like a crown, like thorns coming out of the letter.
You mean the trope?
Well, trope means how to read it. But if you look at a Torah scroll, I wish I would have made you a picture. You know what? Maybe I will share a screen in a minute. Okay, when you see a scribe write a Torah scroll, and you look at a real Torah scroll, not a book like this, they don't have it in here. You'll see some letters have these little thin hats, like thorns, like strings coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's called crowns or thorns, whatever word you want to use. So the letter has a crown on it. Here, I'm going to draw you a letter quickly on a piece of paper and show you. Here, the paper. So here you have the letter bet, right? Okay, and you might see these little, there. Can you see? See how I put little sticks on top of the letter?
Yes.
That's called crowns.
Mm-hmm.
Now you might think the scribe's pen accidentally made these lines. These are called the crowns or the thorns of the letters. So, and you'll see it in the Torah reading. So Moses sees God adding these thorns to the Torah scroll. So Moses says to God, what's going on here? So God says the following. I want to read it to you because it's so beautiful. Just get it. Okay, this is from the Babylonian Talmud called Talmud Bavli, which is the oral tradition written down. Rav Judah said in the name of Rav, when Moses ascended on high, he found the Holy One, God, affixing crowns to the letters. Said Moses to God, why are you doing this? Said God, there will arise a man at the end of many generations. His name will be Akiva. Remember the famous Rabbi Akiva, who I'll remind you about in a minute? Who will expound upon each crown heaps of laws. Moshe said, wow, Allow me to see him. God said, turn around. And Moses found himself sitting 8 rows back in Rabbi Akiva's classroom. In other words, he was transported into time, future, and he met Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so God says there will be a great scholar called Rabbi Akiva, and not only is he going to teach Torah based on Torah, he's going from each crown on each letter based on the letter, he's going to teach even greater insights, laws, traditions, and customs and knowledge based on my crowns. Now, who are these crowns? These are the 3,550 Jews, symbolic, the half shekels who are not part of the 600,000. These crowns. Now, why Rabbi Akiva? Because not only was Rabbi Akiva the greatest rabbi of all generations, except for Moshe, even Moshe says to God, why do you need me? Why am I the leader? Rabbi Akiva should be the leader. But to understand Rabbi Akiva, you have to go back. Remember the story of Rabbi Akiva very quickly? He was a shepherd, a poor shepherd. He was a convert. His grandfather was Sisra, a big anti-Semite. And he was working on the land of Kalba Savul, one of the wealthiest Jews of Israel. And Kalba Savul's daughter Rachel saw this humble shepherd, and she insisted on marrying him, even though he was a convert. And her father said, you're going to marry him? I'm going to disown you of all your wealth. And they lived in poverty. And she became a laundry lady because she couldn't bring food to the house. And they froze in the winter and they boiled in the summer. And she said to her husband, Akiva, I want you to go study in the yeshiva. He was 40 years old because he didn't even know how to read Hebrew. And he says, me? I'm 40 years old, honey. I can't read Hebrew. She said, you will go study. And remember, he was watering the flock and he saw water going on a rock and there was an indent in the rock. And he said, if there could be a dent in the rock from water, Torah equal water, there'll be a dent in my brain. And he goes and he's gone for 20 years and he becomes one of the greatest scholars and leaders of the Jewish nation at the time. And when he comes back, his father-in-law doesn't know that the great Rabbi Akiva is him. And when he comes back to his wife, and he's surrounded by thousands of students and a welcoming committee, and his father-in-law makes for him a throne because this great Rebbe is coming to town, he practically faints when he sees it's his son-in-law. And he begs forgiveness, and he gives back the wealth. But at that time, Rabbi Akiva didn't need the money anymore. He was in his own right. He was a famous scholar. But when they put a crown on Rabbi Akiva's head, he takes the crown, he puts it on his wife's head, and he said, everything I have and everything I am is my wife, Rachel. Because she sends him into yeshiva and she sacrifices. She lives in poverty so that her husband can. And when her husband goes to yeshiva, just a side note, her father comes to the shack where she lives like a beggar. And he says, darling, your husband is never coming back. Come back to the mansion, divorce your husband, and live like a mensch. And she says, no, Daddy, you don't understand who my husband is. And he comes back as the great Rabbi Akiva. So this Rabbi Akiva understood what it means to be an alienated Jew because he grew up as a convert. He didn't know how to read Hebrew. His grandfather was an anti-Semite ruler or somewhere, a conqueror, a warrior who hated Jews. And here he embraces Torah, becomes a Rebbe, a scholar. He understood what it means to be a hook, to be on the outside, to be one of the Jews that's not part of the mainstream. So it's him who takes those crowns and those thorns on top of the letters and expounds upon them. Representative of a Jew who's not maybe looking like you and me, a Jew who maybe even self-hating Jews, alienated Jews, Jews who said, listen, this is not for me. I don't need to be part of these persecuted people with weird rules and regulations, and they eat certain foods and they're crazy. They're always washing their hands. The men wear kippahs and the women go to the mikveh. They're all nuts, those Jews. What do I need to be part of them? Do they even speak? Like somebody asked me if I speak English. I said very little. But anyway, I always make a joke out of it. I don't think people realize. Like I remember holding a newborn baby, and one of the women came over to me and said, "Oh, another one. When are you having the next one?" I said, "Right now, this second." But so Rabbi Akiva understood what it means to be alienated and cut off and uneducated. And so he is the one that takes those crowns and he shows that from those thorns, those crowns, those little sticks that seemingly, what do you need them for in the Torah? You have 600,000 letters. What do you need those extra sticks? Because those extra little sticks, God is saying, are those Jews. They're part of Torah, but they're unrecognized at times. They're alienated, they're cut off, they're disenchanted, but they're equally important. They also have a letter in the Torah, but it might be a little crown in the Torah. So really what happened here in the accounting and transparency, not only about numbers, where Moses tells the people how he spent the money. Here is defined how the meaning of what every person matters in this universe. That's here. This is the lesson. That you are a letter in the Torah. And if you're not there, the rest of the Torah cannot be used. That's the secret of our Jewish identity, by the way. We're not disconnected from the other Jewish people in the world. It's one organism. Yeah, organism. One body, one hand. United as one. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we're all part of the whole. That's our secret, by the way. That's the secret to Jewish survival, that we're one. A Jew in Ukraine is connected to a Jew in the USA. Which now might bring us to the situation in Ukraine, if you want to talk about it for a few minutes. Do you?
Yeah, sure.
So let me hear from you. What is everyone's feelings about it? Like, what's your feeling? What's your insights? Then I'll share a little bit, a Jewish perspective.
Of course, I feel like my heart goes out to the Ukrainian people, and Putin is a monster. People comparing him to Hitler, I don't know if that's accurate, but I heard something that I ordered a flag to put a Ukrainian flag out. And then a friend of mine said he feels for the people, but he won't put a flag out because he lost a lot of people in the Holocaust from Ukrainians, from Nazis. And I don't have a judgment on that. I'm just saying it to hear what other people feel, because I want to fly this flag, but now I feel funny about it.
I know, it is a little weird, but they have a Jewish president.
Right.
And
Right.
his mother is Jewish, his father is Jewish. There's Holocaust survivors. His grandfather's brothers were all killed. His grandfather survived, or his grandmother survived, somebody, and that's where they're all descendants of. They're Holocaust survivors. And he said something I thought was, it's amazing, because they wanted to whisk him out of there, right? He said, "I don't want to ride. I want ammunition," he said.
Yes.
He's a real leader. He's such a leader. I wish other countries would show such leadership like he's showing.
No, I've never seen that before in our lifetime.
It's very horrifying, because Putin is very good to the Jews. He's very close to Chief Rabbi Lazar, and it's a pity he's going to taint all the good that he did now with these horrific acts of just going into a country, indiscriminately killing people. I thought I was reading all the conspiracy theories that he was targeting biohazard plants, nuclear plants, but now I decided, based on the news, that that's not what he's doing. I thought he was just going to wipe out infrastructure. He doesn't want them to be a threat.
Well, during Trump's time, we didn't have this. And if we just told, if Ukrainians just said, fine, I'm not going to join